In recent developments that could reshape the geopolitical landscape, President Donald Trump is articulating an ambitious vision that seeks to redefine the balance of power among the United States, China, and Russia. His comments and actions signal an inclination toward establishing a global order characterized by distinct spheres of influence reminiscent of the imperialist policies of the 19th century. As tensions escalate on multiple fronts, including the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and trade relations with China, analysts are questioning the implications of Trump's approach for international stability. During a recent interview, Trump expressed a desire to normalize commerce with Russia, effectively easing the pressure on Moscow as it continues its military campaign in Ukraine. "We all want to make deals," he remarked, likening his presidency to a giant store where countries are eager to negotiate. This rhetoric is not merely about trade, it hints at a broader strategy where the U.S., China, and Russia each dominate their respective regions, potentially carving up influence in a manner that could undermine the current international order. Critics of Trump's foreign policy are concerned that his overtures to Russia, including discussions about formalizing Russian control over parts of Ukraine, represent a dangerous precedent. Political analysts suggest that this approach could lead to a fragmented world where great powers negotiate borders and resources without regard for the sovereignty of smaller nations. Monica Duffy-Toft, a professor at Tufts University, notes that this push for spheres of influence is driven by a desire to restore a fading sense of grandeur, recalling the Berlin Conference of 1884–85, where European powers divided Africa among themselves. However, Trump's ambitions may not be as straightforward as they appear. Some experts caution against interpreting his actions as part of a strategic foreign policy framework. Stephen Wertheim, a historian at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, suggests that while Trump may express desires to expand American influence, the complexities of international relations make such aspirations difficult to realize. For example, recent elections in Canada and Greenland have demonstrated resistance to U.S. overtures, with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney asserting that his nation is not for sale and Greenland's leaders rejecting any notion of American control. Despite these setbacks, Trump and his administration continue to push forward, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio undertaking significant diplomatic missions to Latin America and the Caribbean. In El Salvador, Rubio negotiated controversial terms allowing the U.S. to deport immigrants to the country, establishing what some describe as an American penal colony. These moves underscore a strategic pivot toward the Western Hemisphere as Trump seeks to solidify U.S. influence in its own backyard. The implications of this approach extend beyond the Americas. Trump's relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping has been marked by both hostility and a willingness to negotiate, particularly regarding tariffs and trade balances. As the U.S. navigates its complex relationship with China, misinformation campaigns have begun to complicate the narrative surrounding trade negotiations. Recent reports indicate that disinformation regarding American consumer behavior and the impact of tariffs has proliferated on social media, potentially undermining the fragile truce reached in negotiations earlier this month. As Trump's administration grapples with these multifaceted challenges, the question remains whether a new world order, one defined by spheres of influence among the U.S., China, and Russia, will stabilize or destabilize international relations. With Trump's track record of unpredictability and a growing skepticism toward established alliances, the future of global diplomacy hangs in the balance. Observers will be closely watching how these dynamics unfold and whether the U.S. can adapt its strategy to maintain influence without provoking further conflict. As Trump continues to advocate for a redefined geopolitical landscape, the responses from China and Russia will be pivotal in determining the path forward in this complex and evolving narrative. In a climate where global trade dynamics are increasingly volatile, the recent U.S.-China trade talks have emerged as a focal point for both optimism and skepticism. Following months of escalating tariffs and strained relations, a joint statement on May 12, 2025 signaled a temporary reprieve, with both nations agreeing to significant tariff reductions. However, experts warn that the underlying tensions remain, complicating the path forward for these two economic giants. The agreement, which follows 3 months of heightened trade conflict, resulted in a substantial rollback of tariffs, reducing them by an impressive 115% on both sides, leaving a mere 10% base rate in place. Additionally, China committed to lifting its non-tariff countermeasures. However, this relief is not without caveats. The reductions are temporary, and several high tariffs, including those on critical sectors such as steel and pharmaceuticals, remain intact. As noted by Stephen Olson, a senior research fellow at the Heinrich Foundation, uncertainty is never good for business. So will U.S. and Chinese trade partners feel comfortable resuming ties amid circling volatility? While the tariff cuts represent a critical breakthrough, the long-term implications are still uncertain. Zhou Weihuan, co-director of the China International Business and Economic Law Center, highlights that the historical context of U.S. China negotiations raises questions about the durability of this newfound dialogue. Previous consultative mechanisms have often failed to deliver meaningful progress, leaving stakeholders wary of whether this latest effort will fare any better. Any form of dialogue is better than the contrary, he states, acknowledging the need for continuous communication despite the complex divide between the two nations. The recent diplomatic tone shift reflects a recognition of the importance of mutual respect and cooperation. Both sides have expressed a desire to engage in further discussions over the next 90 days, which could potentially pave the way for more comprehensive solutions. However, the structural issues that have historically plagued U.S.-China relations, such as China's industrial policies and trade imbalances, remain unaddressed, with the United States eager to rectify its trade deficit, and China perceiving its trade figures as more balanced when accounting for services. The negotiations are poised to be complicated. Moreover, the geopolitical landscape surrounding these negotiations is fraught with challenges. The U.S. has recently intensified its campaign of reciprocal tariffs, which could further strain relations if not handled delicately. The Trump administration's approach to using trade negotiations as leverage against third parties, such as the recent agreement with the UK, also complicates the situation. China has reacted critically, cautioning that cooperation between states should not be conducted against or to the detriment of the interests of third parties, as both nations navigate these choppy waters. The specter of renewed tariff escalations looms large. Recent calls for increased tariffs on European imports by President Trump add another layer of complexity to an already intricate trade environment. The EU's position as the largest U.S. trading partner means that tensions with Europe could have ripple effects that impact U.S.-China discussions. Looking ahead, the success of the latest U.S.-China talks will depend on both sides' willingness to engage in meaningful compromise while managing their competing national interests. As global economic stability remains precarious, the upcoming weeks will be critical in determining whether these tentative agreements can evolve into lasting solutions. As Olson aptly summarizes, as America first collides with a rising China, global economic stability remains precarious, underscoring the need for ongoing dialogue and strategic engagement in an increasingly interconnected world. In recent weeks, the geopolitical landscape in the Indo-Pacific region has grown increasingly complex, with significant military maneuvers and strategic posturing by both the United States and China. As tensions simmer over Taiwan, the U.S. has made notable shifts in its military presence and alliances, prompting stern warnings from Beijing and speculation about the future of regional stability. On May 15, during congressional testimony, retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery disclosed that approximately 500 U.S. military personnel are stationed in Taiwan. This revelation marks a significant escalation in America's support for the self-governed island, transitioning from a previously discreet partnership to one that openly tests Beijing's red lines. Montgomery emphasized the necessity of this military involvement in training Taiwan to become a credible counter-intervention force capable of complicating any potential military actions from China. If we're going to give them billions of dollars in assistance, sell them tens of billions of dollars worth of U.S. gear. It makes sense that we'd be over their training and working, he stated. This acknowledgement dramatically exceeds the previous count of 41 personnel reported just a year earlier, signaling a clear shift in U.S. strategy. In response, Chinese state media aired commentary criticizing the U.S. military presence, framing it as a provocative act that challenges China's sovereignty claims over Taiwan. This heightened military engagement not only escalates tensions between the U.S. and China but also raises questions about the implications for Taiwan's defense strategy and its relationship with Beijing. Further complicating the situation, the U.S. has recently ramped up military exercises in the region. A notable example occurred on May 6, when the U.S. Air Force and Navy conducted a large-scale elephant walk at Kadena Air Base in Japan. This exercise showcased 53 warplanes and highlighted the U.S. commitment to regional stability. Brig General Nicholas Evans, commander of the base's 18th Wing, remarked, "Working alongside our allies and partners, Kadena stands ready to project air power throughout the region to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific." The elephant walk, a term used to describe aircraft taxiing in formation before takeoff, serves as both a demonstration of military might and a deterrent to adversaries. As the U.S. military presence in Taiwan grows, so too does the perception of an impending shift in power dynamics in the Indo-Pacific. Analysts and military experts have noted that the U.S. strategy appears to be focused on enhancing Taiwan's defensive capabilities while simultaneously signaling to China that any aggressive moves could be met with coordinated resistance from American forces and their allies in the region. The ramifications of these developments are profound. China's recent military drills around Taiwan, described as punishment exercises, underline its determination to assert control over the island, which it views as a breakaway province. The combination of U.S. military support for Taiwan and China's aggressive posture creates a precarious situation that could lead to miscalculations on either side. As we look to the future, the delicate balance of power in the Indo-Pacific will likely continue to shift. The U.S. commitment to Taiwan and its military alliances in the region signal a new era of confrontation with China, one that will require careful navigation to avoid escalation into conflict. Observers will be closely watching how both nations respond to these provocations, with the potential for significant geopolitical consequences hanging in the balance.